meeting. I'm just saying, let's follow up with it and we'll loop back around with James. I know you were just doing what he was asking you to do, and that I would like to, there we go. I would like to bring the meeting of the Sandag Regional Energy Working Group to order. This is the September 24th meeting, and we're going to, before we jump into the meeting, I'm going to ask the clerk whether or not we're going to confirm we have a quorum for the recording. So now that we're recording, we'll go ahead and see where we're at with the quorum. Clerk?
Yes, we have a quorum, Chair.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I'd like to remind both members and the public of the process for making comments. The primary members will be using their cameras to basically flag, let me know that they would like to speak. So you turn on your video and that'll queue you up if you'd like to make comment or ask questions. We will be taking live public comments, and primary members will need to remember to self-mute until called upon for comments or questions, and this will allow us to keep the background noise to a minimum. I'd like to ask Anna Lowe, the Sandag Energy Working Group staff lead, to provide a quick reminder on how public comments will work today. Anna?
Yes, thank you very much. And hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailed comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's EWG meeting. In order to provide live comments, please consider doing the following. So obviously, we're here today, so joining the meeting is the crucial first step. Now, if the link didn't seem to work, you can also dial in using your telephone, and that phone number is also provided on the cover page of the agenda. When public comments are invited for an item, please click the raise hand icon on the Zoom platform toolbar on the top right of the screen. So make sure you know which window you're working in. And then at that time, the chair will go ahead and call on you by name. And that would be the name that you've provided to go ahead and make comments for the time allotted. If you are participating by phone and wish to make comments, press star nine on your telephone, and that should indicate that you've raised your hand. And then the chair can then go ahead and call on you, and we'll be referencing the last 3 digits of your telephone number. So just keep note of that. We won't be calling by name. You'll be listening for those 3 digits. And then again, you'll be allowed to provide your comments for the time allotted. The organizers will ask you to mute when you are called on. So I'm sorry, unmute, that's helpful. When you are called on, so that you know, we can hear you, but also we are able to kind of manage some of the background noise just moving forward. And if you are using your telephone, it's *6 to unmute and mute. Feel free to ask again if at any point you forget what those particular numbers are. And then in the instructions for providing live comments are also included at the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the Sandag website, www.sandag.org, and the meeting should be linked right on that front splash page. All comments, whether emailed or live, will be made part of today's meeting record. So if there's any concern, please note that we will be sure to capture all of those comments. So you will be on record for that. And I believe that is everything I have to share as far as some of the housekeeping items. So I'll send it back to you, Chair. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Anna. With that, we're ready to move on. So the second item will be the approval of the
Chair, I think you're muted.
My apologies. Actually, before we move on, I want to see if anybody would like to introduce themselves or just say hello. We'll give about 10 minutes of that right up at the top to see, my apologies, to see if anybody wants to introduce themselves. Go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to just we'll do a quick round of introductions. Or not. Oh, we got one. Okay, looks like Mr. Blythe.
Sorry, it took a second to get unmuted there. Good afternoon, Damon Blythe, Chief Operations Officer for North County Transit District.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for being here. Mr. Warden, I see you.
Good morning. Yes, I'm Dwight Worden, Del Mar City Council, and I believe I'm the alternate to Corey on the committee and just plan to listen in.
Thanks for being here, Dwight. And Mr. Gomez, Ms. Gomez, I only have an A. Gomez. Can we unmute?
Okay, here we go. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is Mola. Sorry, I have not changed my last name to Gomez. Gomez is my wife's last name, and I'm using her Zoom account. So again, I'm with the City of Oceanside. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. All right. And with, let's see, we've got Tyler Farmer.
Yeah, hi, I'm Tyler Farmer with the County of San Diego. Yeah, first time attending the meeting, so just want to do an introduction. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Okay. And with seeing no more hands raised, I will go ahead and move on to the second item on the agenda, which is the approval of the meeting minutes from June 25th, 2020. And see if there are any member comments or if any member would like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
This is Renee Yarmy. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you. And do I hear a second?
This is Raghav Murali. I'll second.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I'd ask the clerk to help us vote. I don't know if we're going to do a roll call vote or if we're going to do a hand raise vote.
I'll do roll call. City of Carlsbad, Councilmember Corey Schumacher, Chair.
Aye.
City of Chula Vista, Councilmember Mike Diaz. Councilmember Mike Diaz.
He's actually
I'll move on.
typed into the chat that he approves. So I'm not sure whether or not he's unable to unmute, but he did.
Okay.
He did type into the chat that he approves.
Okay.
I'm sorry, there I am. I got hooked up as a panelist now. Aye, thank you. And in my quick introduction, Mike Diaz, City of Chula Vista. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay. City of Vista, Councilmember Amanda Rigby.
Aye.
City of Lemon Grove, Councilmember Jennifer Mendoza. Absent. City of San Diego, Lee Friedman. Absent. County of San Diego, Tyler Farmer.
Aye.
MTS, Julia Truer.
Julia, aye.
San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Brendan Reed. Brendan Reed. Absent. Port of San Diego, Renee Yarmy.
Aye.
University of California, San Diego, Michelle Perez.
Aye.
San Diego Gas and Electric, Fernando Valero.
Aye.
Center for Sustainable Energy, Rajev Murali.
Aye.
Energy Policy Incentive Center, Vice Chair Scott Anders.
Aye.
Sierra Club, Krista Davidson.
Aye.
San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce, Mike Evans. Absent. North County Economic Development Council, Paul O'Neill. Absent. And Clean Tech San Diego, Jason Anderson.
Aye.
And that motion, that item passes with all members present.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll move on to item 3, which is public comments, communications and member comments. Do we have any public comments today not related to any matters on today's agenda? Go ahead and please raise your hand so that we can call on you. And that would be in the participants tab of the Zoom.
I see no raised hands for this item, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll go ahead and see if there are any comments from members. So the way that we do this is just go ahead and turn on your camera. So I'm seeing Mr. Diaz has his camera on. I'm wondering if that means, nope, okay. So if there are any members who would like to provide comment today, just go ahead and turn on your video and you'll be recognized. Okay, seeing none. We'll go ahead and move on to item 4, which is the San Diego Regional Electrical Vehicle Rebate Statistics. And I will hand this over to, let's see, Anna, who's going to be presenting this item today?
This is just a consent item. It's for information only and just something that we continue to provide at the request of one of the previous chairs and the membership. So just some statistics around electric vehicle rebates, rebate statistics, both locally and throughout the state from the CVRP California rebate, our Raghav is probably looking at me right now, rebate program. And so just some information. So I think it's just a matter of if there's any additional outside comments or thoughts.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Any additional outside comments or thoughts from the board or public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and receive that information, file it away. It should be available in your agenda. And move on to item 5, which is the Regional Electric Vehicle Charging Program, the CAL VIP, San Diego County Incentive Project Update. And this one's going to be handled by Jeff Hoyos, SANDAG staff, and he'll be presenting an overview of the new electric vehicle charger rebate project for the San Diego region launching this October. Jeff?
All right, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to provide an update on Cali VIP, the San Diego County Incentive Project. I was here in June, it's the last time we met, and provided an overview then. So today I will be providing an update. I'll try not to bore you with all the details that the history behind Cali VIP, but if you want a little bit more details, the report in your agenda packet has a little bit more background on Cali VIP. So I'm surprised it hasn't been mentioned yet, but the new executive order from the governor came out yesterday, which is banning gas-powered vehicles in the sale of new gas-powered vehicles in the year 2035. So Cali VIP is, we're happy that it's in progress right now because it'll help prepare the region for the demand for that will be associated with this new executive order. So we're hoping that Cali VIP will help support the region and the state as we transition to electric vehicles. I'm here today to really provide an update on the project schedule and launch, some upcoming webinars associated with Cali VIP, and report out on the final project requirements that we talked a little bit about last time I was here. Can we go to the next slide, please? For folks that are not super familiar with Cali VIP or may not have attended the last meeting, I want to give just a quick overview. We partnered with the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District as well as the Energy Commission to bring $21.7 million to the to the region of San Diego for publicly accessible charging station incentives. Basically, SANDAG identified a incentive program through our 2015 regional plan as a mitigation measure to reduce GHGs or greenhouse gas emissions from passenger vehicles. So over the next couple of years, we worked with the Air Pollution Control District as well as the Energy Commission to really formalize those partnerships, and happy to announce that we'll be launching a program here this year, the project this year. The Center for Sustainable Energy is the statewide program administrator, so they're the ones who take the rebates and administer the rebates, receive the applications and administer the rebates. So today I'm going to provide, as I mentioned, an update on those final requirements, and that came out of the webinar on August 27th. We spoke a little bit about it on our last meeting in June, but I have some updates there, so I want to provide some more detail. If we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so it's, I guess the first thing I should mention is the project timeline. So initially when I was here in June, we were anticipating launching in December of this year. However, due to a number of factors, COVID included, it looks like we're going to be launching, and it's confirmed that we're going to be launching on October 27th of this year. So it's coming up soon. So I'm here today to provide that update, as well as some information about some upcoming webinars. On October 6th, there will be a pre-launch webinar where CSE, the Energy Commission, will walk through the application process and be able to answer questions at that time. So if your organization, agency, or entity is looking to take advantage of some of these rebates, I highly encourage you to tune in on October 6th at 10 a.m. And listen to that webinar. Today, I'm providing an update on these final requirements, which came from that August 27th webinar, which I mentioned earlier. That was a 40+ slide deck and about a 2-hour presentation. So if you're curious and want to watch the whole thing, it's included in that hyperlink down at the bottom of this slide here, where it says Cali VIP San Diego County Incentive Project presentation. I'm providing the abridged version, so happy to answer any questions if I miss anything, but also encourage you to take a look there if you have more questions about eligibility requirements. Let's see, let's get into things real quick. So this slide shows the San Diego County Incentive Project incentive levels and eligibility. So a couple things have changed, but most of this has remained similar. And so this slide should look very similar to the last time I was here. The project is still first come, first serve, with that disclaimer that 25% of rebate funds or incentive funds are dedicated to disadvantaged communities and low-income communities. Applicants are eligible for up to $80,000 per DC fast charger and up to $6,000 per level 2 connector. For DC fast chargers, you're allowed to apply for up to 6 charger rebates, and for level 2 up to 10. That's you're totally allowed to apply for or install more, but you're only allowed to get incentives for up to 6 DC fast chargers and 10 level 2 chargers. So the base rebate is $4,500 for level 2, with a $1,000 adder if you live in a multi-unit dwelling, and another $500 adder if you live in a disadvantaged community or a low-income community, for a total of $6,000. DC fast rebates are a little bit different. They range from $50,000 to $70,000 depending on the power level your DC fast charger requires. The higher power fast charge DC fast, which are over 100 kilowatts, gets you the $70,000 rebate incentive, where the lower power under 99 kilowatts gets you that $50,000 incentive. If you live in a disadvantaged community or a low-income community, you get a $10,000 adder, so anywhere from $60,000 to $80,000 of incentive there. These numbers here at the bottom of the screen for estimates for charging infrastructure in the region are a little bit conservative, so we're looking to see over 1,100 charging ports and over 250 DC fast chargers. So let's get a little bit into eligibility here. So if we go to the next slide, please. Level 2 charging stations that will likely be eligible consist of public, workplace, and multi-unit dwellings. They need to be shared use, and so that means it can't be dedicated to an individual. One thing that's different from this compared to other programs throughout the state is that fleets are not an eligible project cost, or are not eligible for this incentive, which means that you cannot be installing chargers for dedicated fleet use. However, you can get around this a little bit by installing chargers that are available to the public during day hours, during open hours, and then during the evening, you're allowed to charge your fleets if that works out for your organization. Generally, DC fast and level 2 eligibility differs depending on time of use or dwell time. So DC fast charging stations are eligible in places that generally have an hour or less of dwell time. So those include places like restaurants, airports, hotels, libraries. You can see the list here on the left. And then for level 2, they're a little bit a longer dwell time. So they're really getting to be able to take advantage of that longer dwell time to use those level 2 power. So schools, hospitals, workplaces, and the like. If you have any questions about your site and maybe eligibility for that site, I recommend that you reach out to the Center for Sustainable Energy prior to filing your application to confirm eligibility. That way you don't waste a whole bunch of time trying to get a site and then find out that it's not eligible. It's better to find out beforehand. And CSE is happy to do that. Let's see here. So, okay, let's go on to the next slide, please. So in addition to the incentives that will be available throughout the region, SANDAG is funding additional technical assistance and resources that expands upon the services that are provided through Cali VIP. So really to go above and beyond that 25% of project budget being dedicated to disadvantaged communities and low-income communities, SANDAG is funding an EV expert who will provide no-cost technical assistance to applicants in disadvantaged communities and low-income communities, as well as residents and stakeholders, property owners throughout the region. What I want to focus a little bit more on today, though, is these workforce development and permanent streamlining assistance aspects of this technical assistance. SANDAG and CSE and the Energy Commission are working to develop and to to hold an EVITP information workshop or webinar the week prior to Cali VIP launch in October. And similar, we're working to hold a webinar for permanent streamlining assistance for local governments and authorities having jurisdiction. So both of those webinars are scheduled for the week prior to launch. And as registration information and details, links, and the like become available, I'll be sure to share that with the group here. I did not mention earlier that the October 6th pre-launch webinar registration link is now available, and I have shared that with the EWG staff, and so they'll be able to share that with the EWG mailing list as a follow-up to this meeting. All right, so I think with that, we can go to that last slide here, and I want to just reiterate a couple things. We got that October 6th webinar coming up. I encourage you to listen to that if you are looking to take advantage of these incentives. And then we're launching October 27th. So it's coming up real soon, and we're excited to be launching these incentives throughout the region. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. We can go to that last slide. One thing I'll mention before I turn it back over to the chair is that, go to the next slide, please, is that the Center for Sustainable Energy has an email and dedicated phone number that are, so they're able to answer questions about Cali VIP, specifically in the San Diego region. They get back to you within about 24 hours. And you're also able to go to calivip.org and sign up for the newsletter, so you get all the email blasts about upcoming webinars, project launch, and the like. And then if you have any questions for SANDAG about SANDAG involvement or generally Cali VIP questions, you're welcome to reach out to myself or Susan Friedman, who's the project manager for Cali VIP from SANDAG. So with that, I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Do we have any, before we move on to questions, I just want to check in to see if we have any public comments. Anna, do you see any?
I'm scrolling. I don't see any hands at this time.
Okay. Thank you very much. So then we'll go ahead and move on to any comments or questions from the members. So you can go ahead and turn on your video or raise your hand in the participation tab. You seeing any, Anna?
I see no hands in the participation tab, and I'm also trying to, I don't see any cameras on either. So it looks like, oh, Rogov is on. Perhaps he has a question.
Hi, folks. Just a quick comment that, you know, we really appreciate working with SANDAG on this project. We're super excited about it as the administrator, statewide administrator of the program. And, you know, reiterate what Jeff said. If anybody has any questions about the program, either the project or just the program separate and apart from this particular project, you know, don't hesitate to reach out to me or Kinchuk, who's also with CSE and as an alternate on this committee. And also just want to, you know, reiterate that it's our understanding, and, you know, we're highly confident that, especially in light of this EO, that we're extremely excited about, that the CEC kind of views Cali VIP as a really important tool going forward to help effectuate the growth of the market and increase chargers. So that's just my general comment. Thanks.
Thank you. I had a quick question, if that's okay. I'd love to hear just a little bit more, if you can expand a little bit more on the workforce development piece.
Sure. So so SANDAG is working with CSE to hold this informational webinar on, I believe it's going to be the 22nd, but as I mentioned, the registration links are not finalized, but happy to share that. So that'll be kind of a primer for folks. There's already been one EVITP training session that was held on September 8th that we blasted through Cali VIP for electrical contractors. And that's really to share best practices and safety information about installing charging stations throughout the region and throughout the state. So we'll be working with the EVITP folks, CSE and SANDAG to really coordinate these going forward to make sure that we can really grow that workforce development within the San Diego region. And they'll be held about 2 times a year.
Okay. Are there any special permitting required by the state for this type of work, or can you just talk a little bit about how specifically this project will grow the workforce? And I know that there's going to be seminars. I'd love to hear just a little bit more about the actual workforce development operations side of things.
Yeah, so there are the permitting aspects come from the AHJ, so that's your local governments. I'm not aware, and Susan I think is on this call, so she can chime in here if I miss anything. But I'm not aware of any state requirements for Cali BIP infrastructure at this point. But I think that EBITP is a best practice, and SANDAG supports educating the workforce. And right now there are no requirements for EBITP for installations, but that may become a requirement in the future. And so really just trying to get ahead of that curve there and share best practices and safety considerations.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jeff. Any other questions, comments from members? Okay, seeing none, and I'm not getting a little jab from Anna, so seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Thank you so much, Jeff. Really appreciate it. Well done. So item 6 is going to be the role of hydrogen in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And Keith Malone is going to be providing us an update. He's from the California Fuel Cell Partnership, and he'll be providing an overview of hydrogen and its role in helping the state achieve both greenhouse gas emissions reductions goals and zero emission vehicle goals. Keith?
Thank you, Corey. Good morning, everyone. My name is Keith Malone. I'm with the California Fuel Cell Partnership. I've been with the partnership now for 8 years. I've also been driving a fuel cell electric vehicle of various kinds for fully 7 years. Next slide, please. Just to give you some background and to help you understand kind of the context of what I'm going to share with you, the partnership is a public-private partnership. We've been around for 20 years now. As you can see from our membership, it is varied. It is an interesting mix, to say the least. Our members include, on the government side, from South Coast Air Quality Management District. At the state level, it includes the California Air Resources Board, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, as well as the U.S. Department of Energy. We have many of the major automakers that are members, and a number of recognizable hydrogen producers and hydrogen station developers. And we work together to really push fuel cell electric vehicles of all kinds and the hydrogen fueling infrastructure and hydrogen production further along the commercial pathway. And I will note that about 50% of our members work on both pathways, both battery electric and fuel cell electric. So embedded within our organizational DNA is the recognition that in order to get to that zero emission future, you need both technologies. Next slide, please. So to kind of give you a sense, really what I'm going to probably talk about more than anything, in addition to vehicles, is really infrastructure. I mean, for both pathways, that's really how you get those, the cars on the road. And 3 simple numbers I think are a good way to give you a foundation for understanding what we're talking about: 100, 200, 1,000. So the first milestone we have in California, and maybe I should back up for a second to remind everyone, this market, the market for passenger fuel cell electric vehicles, launched in 2015 with the introduction of the Toyota Mirai. So I want to keep in perspective what's been going on over the last 5 to 7 years. So the first milestone is 100 stations. That's funded through Assembly Bill 8 that was passed in 2013. Right now in California, you'll see in a second, we're at about just over 40 stations that are open and available to the public. Less than 20 are in development. And I'll be talking in just a little bit about a recent station funding announcement that will get us well past 100 stations and much closer to the next goal of 200 stations, a goal that was set in an executive order by Governor Brown back in 2018 and reinforced in a subsequent executive order by Governor Newsom, and in many ways reinforced by yesterday's announcement. And then lastly, our members in 2018 came out with a 2030 vision that called for 1,000 hydrogen stations serving upwards of 1 million fuel cell cars, buses, and trucks. Next, please. So on our website, we have a number of resources that are available if you're looking to catch up on what's happening with fuel cell electric cars, buses, and trucks, and more. This is our by the numbers page, and we update it monthly on the number of cars that have been sold and leased in the US, how many buses are on the road. We usually do a quarterly check-in with transit agencies and more. About 3 weeks ago, the California Energy Commission announced funding for an additional 100 plus stations. And I'm going to be vague about that number just because of the way kind of the notices are made by the Energy Commission. So they're going to be funding these 100 plus stations in batches, and the first batch of stations is 36. And some of those stations include the San Diego area. Many of you may have seen some of the stories that have come out by local TV and the San Diego Union Tribune. And I'll be happy to talk to you further about stations in San Diego in just a bit, because right now we've got one station that's open in Del Mar. We've got another station that's within the next 6 months should be opening up in the Mission Valley area. Next slide, please. And so I'm going to quickly just kind of veer back to vehicles, and just to kind of give you a sense of what vehicles are on the road here in California. At the top, you can see the Honda Clarity. Its EPA estimate is 366 miles on a fill-up. Right below it is the Hyundai Nexo. That's the car that I currently drive. And that gets 300 EPA estimate, 380 miles on a fill-up. And below is the first generation Toyota Mirai, EPA estimate 312 miles on a fill-up. And both types of vehicles, battery electric and fuel cell electric, bring a lot of benefits to the drivers. And oftentimes when I'm at public events, I have my sun hat on, I've got the car next to me, I've got the hood popped open, and they'll ask me which car is better. I'm like, well, it depends. It depends on what you want. It depends on what you need. It depends on your circumstances. Do you live in a multi-unit dwelling? Are you an on-street parker and don't necessarily have access to a station? Are you within the right location of a hydrogen station? I mean, there's a lot of kind of criteria to kind of determine what car is best for you, what works best for you. And next slide, please. And there are more cars that are coming to market. Up the top left, that is the second generation Toyota Mirai. And that should be unveiled towards the end of this year, early next year. This particular vehicle, the first generation Mirai, it's a 4-seater, 312 miles. This one is a 5-seater, and the expected EPA estimate around 400 miles on a fill-up. We also know that other automakers are coming to market, including BMW. They have a joint technology sharing agreement with Toyota, and Audi. They have a joint technology sharing agreement with Hyundai as well. If you look across the globe, you'll see a lot of alliances, just like you see in the battery electric side, where they are looking to drive down costs as quickly as they can. And obviously going to scale is one of those ways. And then it's kind of a, I don't know, a treat. Recently announced was the Hyperion XP1. They're only going to make 300 units of this, and this is for the wealthy folks in the nosebleed section of income levels. So it should be quite an interesting vehicle to see when it's introduced. Next slide, please. So to talk a little bit more about stations, I wanted to show you the prettiest hydrogen station in the world. This is at La Cañada Flint Ridge in Los Angeles County. And when I talk about hydrogen stations, at least here in the US, what I'm talking about is usually hydrogen equipment based at an existing gas station. Given that you're fueling up in 3 to 5 minutes, it's a similar business case for gas station owners. And so in many ways, hydrogen fueling gives gas station owners kind of their just transition, their way, their on-ramp to kind of the green highway, if you will. Next slide, please. And that La Cañada Flint Ridge station I showed you, next slide, please. And I'll show you in a second. That is really one of the first generation stations. And I'm going to show you the newer ones in the second slide. So again, getting back to some of the resources that are available on our website, we have a Google-based map that shows you stations that are open, stations that are in development. We are also including stations for transit agencies, as well as the 3 heavy-duty stations that are now under construction. They are all based in Los Angeles County at the moment. Very shortly, we should have on here all of the proposed or recommended stations under the recent California Energy Commission award. And then to the left, you're going to see I included kind of a clip of one of the, I won't call it an app, it's how about a smartphone enabled web page. We actually collect all the data from the hydrogen stations and we share that with our members. So in your cars, in the Toyota Mirai, the Hyundai Nexo, and the Honda Clarity, you also have data available on your dashboard. And others have created apps as well. So we collect that data to share it out so people can see kind of where can I go? Where can I fill up? I think this shouldn't be anything new to anybody listening to this, to my presentation. Next slide, please. So in just 5 short years, just like you see with a lot of other technologies, about every year or two, we see this sort of, we have a next generation moment. So the stations the early stations that we're looking at are about 180 to 200 kilogram stations. And what you're seeing right now, because the costs have come down substantially, because of some of the new mechanisms coming out of the low carbon fuel standard, a new capacity credit, you're now seeing stations that are 2, 3, 4, even 8 times larger than these earliest stations. So in the upper left, you have the recently opened Fountain Valley station, which is a 1,200 kilogram a day station. And you have 4 fueling positions. Right now, only 3 can fuel simultaneously. Very shortly, we should see 4 of them fueling simultaneously. In the lower left, we have the Shell stations that are about 400 kilograms. In the upper right, you see the Oakland station, which is an 800 kilogram station. So lots of good, and I should add in particular with the Fountain Valley and the Oakland stations, they really show what's coming. They were able to drop their fuel prices by 20 to 25%. So some really good signs that we're seeing costs coming down, we're seeing greater availability, we're seeing a larger and more reliable network. Next slide, please. So this is the question that comes up all the time. We're asked about hydrogen. And hydrogen is on a renewable pathway here and around the globe. One of the things I do in my job is on a near daily basis, I am tracking activity across the globe. And one of the things you see is that that hydrogen's on a renewable pathway. Here in California, we mandate that at least 33% of the content must be renewable. And with the new low carbon fuel standard capacity credit, that goes up to 40%. Right now, we have stakeholders in the background working on legislation to put hydrogen on its final pathway to 100% renewable and 0 carbon content. Next slide, please. So hydrogen, oftentimes when we talk about it as a fuel, but it's much more than that. I think the world is beginning to see that. Here in the US, we're seeing a couple of things that are going on. So for example, about 20 private sector companies released the roadmap to a US hydrogen economy. And one of those 20 contributing companies, for example, was Microsoft. Microsoft sees hydrogen and fuel cells as a way to power their data centers. Also in that roadmap, you have some of kind of the, I'll call them the usual suspects, but some new companies like Microsoft kind of started participating, including BMW, Audi, and a few other energy companies. You'll also notice at the bottom, UC Irvine followed a number of other studies, analyses, and reports over the last year that says that we can get to low-cost renewable hydrogen by 2030. But the caveat here is we need the policies in place. So just like we did for wind and solar, we need to be setting those policies here in California and across the US as well if we're meant to achieve that. Next slide, please. On the global side of on the global stage, we're beginning to see, we're not even beginning to see over the last few years, we've seen at least 20 countries issue hydrogen strategies or hydrogen roadmaps, the most recent of which were Germany and Europe. And these are part of their larger kind of Green New Deals. And if you look at them, hydrogen is not sort of this side activity. Hydrogen is central to their decarbonization efforts. So they joined the EU as well as Germany joined South Korea, Japan, Australia, and others. And so it's been a real interesting 6 months to kind of watch the world awaken to hydrogen and see what the possibilities are with it. Next slide, please. So I focused mostly on the light duty sector, and I wanted to be clear that where hydrogen will certainly shine, we certainly need in the passenger category, but fuel cell trucks, fuel cell buses, and other types of mobility are absolutely necessary. But hydrogen and fuel cells seem to excel in these vehicle categories. So for right now, we're kind of in the early stages. As I mentioned, we have 3 heavy duty stations that are being built. You're seeing a number of players come in into this scene. You already have Cummins. Cummins bought out Hydrogenics, a fuel cell manufacturer, an electrolyzer manufacturer last year. You have Toyota and Kenworth working together. Hyundai is working on a 1,600 truck project in Switzerland, and I wouldn't be surprised if you hear a US announcement from them soon. Daimler, the parent company, and Mercedes-Benz also announced and unveiled their fuel cell electric truck. So a lot is beginning to percolate out of this vehicle category, and you will see for a while probably the concentration of activity in the Long Beach and Los Angeles ports. Next slide, please. And buses, transit buses are certainly a key component of this. Buses tend to be the early adopters within the heavy duty category, and fuel cell buses are no exception to that rule. California has about 20 years of experience with fuel cell buses, mainly with 2 key agencies, Sunline Transit out in the Inland Empire and AC Transit out of the East Bay. The 3rd large transit agency to join them has been the Orange County Transportation Authority. They just, in the last about year or 2, took on 10 fuel cell buses, and they have a hydrogen station that will be able to accommodate upwards of 50. So most of you know, transit agencies, buses are required to go zero emission by, I believe, 2040. Truck pathway as well. With buses, we're beginning to see the first rollout plans being submitted to the California Air Resources Board. On our website, and at the end of my slides, I have links to these. We have a resources database. You can go into it and type in the word rollout, and most of the rollout plans are there. I've also included a snippet here from Foothill Transit that did a cost comparison of battery electrics and fuel cell electrics. What you're seeing across the state is many agencies are looking at a combination of both. For example, Sunline, which is very much committed to fuel cell buses, about 60 to 70% of their fleet they project will be fuel cell. And they've certainly been a leader in many ways. I mean, back in 1994, they were the first transit agency to go all natural gas or CNG bus in one day. So they clearly have a history of leadership. We also produced a roadmap for fuel cell electric buses back in 2018. One of our members, the Center for Transportation and the Environment, just released a guidebook for deploying zero-emission transit buses. So there's a lot of activity, a lot of fascinating activity going on with these buses here and around the world. Right now, buses here in the US are more expensive than anybody wants to see. But if you look to Europe, where they have a much greater volume, their prices, I think, are down to about the 800,000 range. Here in the US, it's still at 1.1 million. But really all the indicators are with volume, we're going to see prices go down. Next slide, please. So I've listed here a few references that might be able to assist you if you want to learn more about this. If you have questions, I'm certainly willing to talk with you face-to-face via Zoom or by the phone and help bring you up to speed if you have questions about what's going on in your city or what potentially could happen there with fuel cell electric vehicles and hydrogen stations. And with that, I want to thank you very much for your time. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much, Keith. We'll go ahead and see if there's any public comment before heading into any member comments or questions. Anna, can you help me with this one?
Yes, so it looks like Mo has a comment in the chat here, and technically Mo actually is a representative from your neck of the woods, so we can have him speak now, or if you wanted, I don't see any other hands raised from members of the public, so up to you how you'd prefer to.
Okay, well, Mo, please, let's go ahead and go with Mo's comment or question.
No, actually, I have a question which I put in the chat box. The hand will raise when you were going around table about members, and since I'm a member representing Oceanside, I just raised my hand, but that's okay. But the question was already typed in my chat box. Basically, the question was for the last speaker. If you would please talk a little bit about the cost related to per mile of using the fuel cell vehicles and in comparison to the gasoline one. That way then when I talk to my city folks, I can tell them for mile gasoline costs this much, but for fuel, hydrogen fuel, it costs this. That's how the management usually wants to know.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. You know, it's important to remember that we're still an early adopter country here with fuel cell electric vehicles. So the prices are going to be probably a little bit higher than your staff would like to see right now in the light duty side of things. You've obviously got 2 sedans and you've got a crossover utility vehicle. So your sales prices, if you purchase, are going to be a little bit higher than you'd find with a gasoline vehicle. Fuel prices actually are something they wouldn't necessarily have to deal with right now. If you purchase or lease a fuel cell electric vehicle, obviously you get some of the same benefits with the state. You get the HOV lane sticker, you get the $4,500 rebate check. You also get free fuel for 3 years. So as cities start to pursue fleet vehicles, and if they are looking for sedans for certain types of activities, I can put them in touch with the fleet managers at Toyota, at Hyundai and Honda to talk with them about that, because they can probably work out some special deals. But I'll say this, right now we don't have a lot of comparative data. And also just because, again, we're an early adopter country with these vehicles, it may not be really the right comparison. I mean, some cities are really committed to bringing on fuel cell electric vehicles, so they're willing to bear the additional cost. But I think there are some that have found some really good deals with that right now. For example, those first generation Mirai, there are a number of them that have come off their leases and are in the pre-owned category. So there may be some interesting opportunities, and I'm happy to connect your staff up with the right people.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would like to get a hold of you later on, and we can continue this. And as I said, when I talk to my fleet manager, I need to convey all these things to him. That will makes my life a little bit easier to convince people.
And I'm also happy to talk to the fleet manager, your city fleet manager.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, well, Anna, I'll get your info from Anna later on, and we take it from there. Thank you.
Absolutely. And one of the considerations obviously right now is that they would be using one of these retail stations, these public stations. So it really depends, again, like talking to personal friends, who are interested, and it's like, what stations do you have near you? So that also may be a consideration. But if I remember from the recent notice of proposed awards for hydrogen station, I thought I saw Oceanside. Again, folks, there's over at least 60, a good 60 or some odd stations that have been specifically named. So trying to remember all the locations, but I do recall that San Diego's at least scheduled, I think, for at least four more stations. So it's a really good sign for your market. Automakers really want to get into these communities.
Thank you very much, Keith. And thank you, Mo, for the questions. I do have another question or comment from Tim Sassine.
Hi, Tim. Tim?
Sorry, let me know when I'm coming through.
I hear you, Tim.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Thank you, Keith. That was an excellent overview. Just wanted to give a quick word. I'm Tim Sassine from Ballard Power Systems. We're world leader in heavy duty fuel cell modules. And support Keith's point, we've seen a huge uptake in fuel cell bus in the rollout plans that are being presented to the state of California. And cost trajectories are coming down rapidly. If any of you, actually shout out to Tesla, if any of you saw the Battery Day presentation yesterday, really impressive stuff, and their manufacturing, for that continuous manufacturing, is something that we're implementing now on the fuel cell side, and just starting to get to the kind of volumes that they're talking about. In the buses, we're seeing range capabilities demonstrated in excess of 50% or greater of the battery buses. When you look at the battery side, you see a $2 trillion investment needed to get about 16% range increase. So it kind of demonstrates where the complementarity of the two technologies are. Both technologies are really needed for zero emissions, and our cost trajectories on the fuel cell side are really fantastic. Got a lot of ground to gain, and already we're seeing very good comparisons with conventional fuel economies. Our buses at 8 miles per kilogram and at $8 per kilogram are somewhere on par with what diesel buses are doing, but we're seeing even better fuel economies than that on. So just wanted to kind of give that supplementary information on the heavy duty side, especially as we talk about transit buses and as we talk about trucks to come.
Thank you very much, Tim. Anna, do we have any other member comments or questions at this time?
I don't see any more oh, there is one. Just kidding. Let's see. Fernando with SDG&E has a comment.
Wonderful. Please go ahead, Fernando.
Keith, great presentation. Good to chat with you today. I was curious if you could kind of talk about, the low carbon fuel standard and the hydrogen refueling infrastructure credit, and just how that interplays with some of this hydrogen fueling stations.
So up until last year, for those who may not be familiar, the low carbon fuel standard was created to incentivize the production of low carbon, zero carbon fuels. And so, and this has come out, and it's been in place since about 2008. So any kind of hydrogen you make is lower carbon than gasoline tends to be the reference point, the line in the sand. And so last year, members of ours proposed a capacity credit, because one of the challenges we've had here in California, both with charging stations and hydrogen stations, you get funded, it takes a while to build, and by the time you've opened that station, oftentimes you can be at or beyond capacity. So the goal was to find a way to incentivize building capacity ahead of need. And so what this capacity credit says, and you're allowed a certain limit that you can build up to a certain amount. And so what it says is you're going to get this capacity credit minus the credits you get for the fuel that you sell. So the more fuel you sell, the less of a capacity credit you get. So over time, it's meant to sunset. And so that additional credit into the LCFS has really incentivized the entrance of more companies into the market. So we're now beginning to see others start to enter. We've had Chevron, for example. They joined the International Hydrogen Council last year and announced they would be building pilot stations here in California. And there are others who did not win the proposed awards out of the Energy Commission, but I would suspect that given this credit, you will see them come to market as well. So we're in the background right now working on policy ideas to really help push both fuel cell electric vehicles and battery electric vehicles further into the market. And given the governor's executive order yesterday, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And so one of the things out of the fuel cell and hydrogen community is that you have a lot of work being done to figure out how do we incentivize all elements of this market, and the LCFS capacity credit has certainly been one of them. But I think we do need to look at hydrogen like we did with wind and solar, where they were 20 years ago, and really kind of build the foundation for this, because hydrogen is more than just a fuel. It's really key to the energy transition, but that's a whole other conversation. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. And it looks like Mr. Scott Anders, please.
Yes, thank you. Keith, thank you for the presentation. Really good information. I had a question. You mentioned about the renewable content of hydrogen and its interplay with this low carbon fuel standard capacity credit. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Well, the capacity credit is really for hydrogen fueling stations or charging stations. And so the capacity credit doesn't necessarily incentivize well, it does incentivize the creation of more renewable content, because with the creation of that capacity credit, they said any station that qualifies and benefits from this credit, you have to go from 33% renewable hydrogen to 40%. I will also add, if you look at a lot of the stations today, many of them are already at 100%. And you're now beginning to see efforts 5 years into this. For example, we have Air Liquide. They are building a renewable hydrogen production plant in North Las Vegas to serve the Western states. You're now beginning to see others come into the market and see how can we produce renewable hydrogen and make it available for the California market. And so a lot of times it's really about, as we talk with them, kind of timing. You know, when they talk about, you often hear this chicken and the egg issue about fueling infrastructure in cars. Some have described it more as chicken and chicken feed and or hot dog and a bun. You need both and you need them timed. Well, it's not just about cars and the fueling infrastructure, it's also the hydrogen production and renewable and zero carbon hydrogen production infrastructure. And increasingly, we're beginning to see as we scale up, there needs to be a greater recognition of that, and how do we kind of balance that all out, provide incentives, you know, the carrots and the sticks that are needed to make it all work. So I hope that answered your question. Maybe not.
Yes, that was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott and Keith, and everybody else who has asked questions and provided comment. Seeing no more comments, just checking in with Anna. Are we, do you see any further comments?
I think that, I think we have received all of the comments.
Wonderful.
No, this time.
Thank you very much. So seeing no further comments, we will go ahead and move on to the next item, which is item 7. And thank you very much, Keith. That was a great presentation.
I had a great time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and move on to item 7, which is the North County Transit District Innovative Clean Transit ZEB Rollout Plan Overview. ZEB, Zero Emission Bus Rollout Plan. And Damon Blythe, Chief Operations Officer for the Transit and Planning Bus Operations for NCTD, will be presenting today. Damon?
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So I'll be, as the chair said, I'll be presenting on our rollout plan. Next slide, please. So just I'm going to run through the update on our pilot and our planning project. present some of our analysis that we've gotten back, and discuss our transition. We've got a couple of alternatives that we're looking at and the next steps from there. Next slide, please. So just a sort of map of where we've been in the last 6 months. So our final ZEB study rollout report, we hired a consultant to help us with our rollout plan. Their final study was completed in January 2020, and I'll be discussing some of that today. We finished our draft plan in March. We held some workshops with SDG&E and STV, our consultant, in April, and we finished our plan in June. Our board approved that plan in June. We submitted it July 1st. And in the July board meeting, we also received approval from the board to buy our 6 first battery electric buses. Our plan was approved by the State Air Resources Board in September, just earlier this month. And we anticipate our pilot program is going to last from 21 to 24, at which point we'll be making some decisions about which path or paths we want to move forward on. Next slide, please. So just some background. The Clean Fleet Rule was adopted in 2000 by the South Coast Air Quality Management District. The whole point of that was to move fleets from diesel buses to alternative. We chose to go down the CNG path. Right now our fleet is 152 buses for Breeze. 9 of those are diesel, 143 of them are CNG. Had the mandate not been handed down here this last fall, we would have been 100% CNG by early next year. However, plans changed, so we're adapting. Next slide, please. So the innovative Clean Transit Regulation, the last speaker kind of gave you a little overview of that. It was adopted in December of 2018 by CARB. Basically, it applies to full-size buses right now, but it will in the future apply to cutaway buses, motor coaches, think the the big charter coaches, and articulated buses as soon as those sort of requirements can be met by current technology. The thing about ICT is it's largely focused on the district's ability to put into place depot charged battery electric buses. The plan doesn't mandate a rollout to, or the regulation doesn't mandate a rollout to anything else. It just says that they want you to use zero emission buses, whichever technology you want. But all of the exemptions are based on the ability of a depot charged battery electric bus to meet your needs. So for that reason, you'll see sort of some of the slides to come. We'll be talking about how those buses may or may not meet our needs. The interesting thing about the ICT is that we can get credit by putting battery electric buses or fuel cell electric buses into service prior to the end of 2022. And those buses provide a credit which we can use to defer future procurements because each year in the ICT, starting in 2023, there's a procurement schedule that mandates that 25% of your buses in the first 3 years, 50% of your buses in the next 3 years, and by 2029, all of your buses that you purchase have to be zero emissions buses unless you apply for an exemption. Next slide, please. So here's those numbers. There are some discharges from the state. So 850 zero emission buses are procured by anybody in the state, taken as a group by the end of 2020, so in 3 months. Then the mandate for 2023 goes away. If there's 1,250 buses purchased by the end of December of this year, then the mandate for 2024 goes away. Next slide. And for our purposes, we're assuming that those mandates won't be met. And I just wanted to, I wasn't sure what the familiarity of this group was with zero emission buses, so I just kind of wanted to take a slide and explain what they are. At the heart of it, they're both battery electric buses, really. The battery electric bus is basically like your standard Tesla, right? It's got a huge battery. It's powered by an electric motor. That power goes to one or more axles on the bus. You can charge it by plugging it in. Different from a Tesla, though, that you can charge that bus with an overhead system or with an inductive system underneath the bus. A fuel cell electric bus, like I said, it's still a battery electric bus. It still has an electric motor. Actually still has a battery in it. The only difference is the battery is considerably smaller, like 1/4 the size. And it's mainly charged, it creates its own electricity on board. So the fuel cell is actually generating electricity by that hydrogen, and then that is used to actually charge the battery, which is then used to power the motor. So at the end of the day, the bus operator really doesn't see a huge difference in how the two buses drive. It's just that the fuel cell electric bus has a much greater range than the battery electric bus so far. Next slide. So for the purposes of our study, we assumed that our current service levels and our fleet size would remain consistent. It's really the only way to run the study, right? Apples to apples comparison. We maintained the current series of retirements, and our assumptions are always a 14-year fleet replacement. The Federal Transit Administration mandates that you have to keep a bus at least 12 years or 500,000 miles. We're a little more conservative than that, and we keep buses on average of 14 years. And right now, the state isn't mandating it, but we did look at it anyway, and the cutaway technology that's out there doesn't yet meet our service requirements. So we're not proposing to move Lift and Flex, our paratransit and our on-demand, over to zero emissions just yet. This is only focused on Breeze. Next slide. And we're not going to go into details here, but basically there's two ways to look at the range of efficiency that the bus is going to be operating at. It's either nominal or strenuous. Nominal means that basically we're driving a bus down a flat road with barely any passengers on it, barely any HVAC load on it or heat load on it. We're not opening the doors a terrible amount. We're stopping, at bus stops on average. And with that, the battery electric bus in general is going to go anywhere between 117 and 160 miles. The strenuous is that we're going up and down hills. We have a lot of passengers on board. It may be hotter or colder than an average temperature, so you may be using either heat or air conditioning, which obviously draws down the battery. And you're not stopping very frequently, which means the bus doesn't have a chance to recharge as much. You're only going to get at most 133 miles. For the planning of range here, you can't always assume that perfect condition of 160 miles because the bus is never going to operate in that sort of perfect world all the time. And so you have to use the strenuous model for planning purposes. Next slide. And can you just click one more time? There'll be an animation that plays here. It's not much, don't get excited. All right, so for 2019, which was the year we did the study, the graph down at the bottom represents the number of blocks that we have. A block is a piece of work that a bus is going to do during the day. And we looked at all of our blocks on weekdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So when you combine all three day types, we have 320 pieces of work that we need buses to do. And the slide on the left-hand side shows you how many miles each one of those pieces of work is. And so you can see when we use that 133 mile limit, only roughly 55% of our blocks are actually achievable by a battery electric bus. And remember, we're talking about depot only charged, which means you're going to plug the bus in at night, it's going to charge overnight, you're going to drive it, and then you won't charge it again during the day until the night. So right now, 55% of our routes could actually be covered by depot only. The other 45% couldn't be. So that other 45% means we need to do something different. We're either going to have to recut the work and try to reassign it to one of the other buses, which is sometimes difficult to do because both buses are out there at the same time, or you're going to be charging it en route, which means that now you're charging the bus in the middle of the day. And for those of you that have air conditioning, you know that the electricity rates that you get charged in the middle of the day are often much higher than the rate you get charged in the middle of the night. So next slide. So again, when we get to 2042, now keep in mind the goal is that all the buses will be zero emissions by 2040. If we were to retire all of our buses at the 14-year mark, we won't actually get to zero emissions until 2042. Obviously, we're going to try and meet the state goal, but finances and other things are going to, play a part in that. This is assuming an average increase of 5% in battery capacity every other year. Right now, they're seeing, from what I'm told, between 2 and 4% each year. So we kind of took the middle road there. Even still, at 2042, a depot-only charged battery electric bus only works 86% of the time. Again, the other 14% of the time, I'm going to have to figure out some other methodology. Next slide. And so this just kind of gives you that progression, but we're showing here a fuel cell electric bus. So a fuel cell electric bus, because it's generating its own electricity and we're not relying on battery storage to make it through the day, a fuel cell electric bus will do anywhere between 300 and 320 miles on a given fueling. A battery electric bus, like we said, we can expect about 133 miles with today's technology, and that goes up to, I think it's roughly 200 as we go throughout the years. So as you can see, we're still not quite there. Your average CNG bus, for comparison, which is what most of my fleet is, will actually do 350 miles on a single fueling. So neither one of these actually match the range of my bus, but we're not actually using 350. If we could get 300, we'd be totally happy. Next slide. So our current plans right now, for our pilot, we're planning on buying 6 battery electric buses in 2021. We're actually going to buy 8 fuel cell electric buses in 2022. Those 14 buses allow us to wait until 2025 to order any further zero emissions buses if I'm only ordering 10 CNG buses in 2023 and 2024, which is kind of what we're planning. We're going to continue buying CNG buses through 2028, which is the CARB mandated cutoff. We have 20 each year planned for the next 3 years. We've accelerated that slightly, so we won't actually be buying those 20. We actually bought 53 of them. We're in the process of doing that right now. All of our remaining purchases after 2029 will be zero emission buses of some kind, battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell. I can't tell you which one yet because we just don't know. We want to put those 14 buses out on the road, see what kind of issues we have with both, see what kind of great things both of those buses have to offer, and then make a decision in the future about which path we're going to go. And like the previous gentleman said, we may end up actually buying both, or we may decide that, hey, we can make battery electric buses work. We've just got to figure out this charging thing. Or we may decide, hey, the fuel cell electric buses are the way we want to go, and we may entirely go that way. Next slide. So these are just some scenarios. Just for quick reference, you can just kind of see the orange is our CNG fleet. And so as you can see, if we do battery electric depot only or battery electric en route, that sort of shows you the progression of how we would replace those buses. Next slide. And then if we did fuel cell electric buses, so you can see that first one, we have a mixture of fuel cell and battery electric depot. So we're not doing any in-route charging, but those really long routes, we're just going to use fuel cell electric buses for that. Or if we decide, hey, you know what, fuel cell really is the future, and we're just going to go all in, we've still got that small wedge of green there. That's the 14-year life of the battery electric buses we're buying right now. And then in the future, they would disappear and we would go all fuel cell. Next slide. So these are sort of our scenarios that we're looking at. Right now, the 14 buses gives us a 4% zero emissions bus out of our entire fleet. If we ever went to only depot, only charging, we would be at 86%, and we would have to keep something else here, either fuel cell or not buy totally zero emissions. If we did depot and on-route charging or the mixed fleet or fuel cell, by 2042, we would be at 100%. Next slide. So this just kind of gives you a cost. This is what we're seeing. Obviously, you know, everybody's got a different source, so your source may say something higher or lower. Right now, I can buy a CNG bus for about $600,000. If I was to replace that entire fleet, we'd be looking at $91 million. Battery electric buses on the high end are running about $900,000. And again, I'm looking at $136 million to replace the entire fleet. Hydrogen fuel cells, $1.1 million. And again, we're looking at $167 million to replace the entire fleet. And keep in mind, that's just the bus cost. And we're going to get into the rest of it here. Next slide. So obviously, I've already got the equipment at NCTD to support a CNG fleet. So there's $0 to continue upgrading that. It's already here. I do have maintenance costs, but all we're talking about here is new capital. So if we were to put in the infrastructure necessary to go to 100% battery electric, that means both depot and en-route charging. Our rough estimate right now is about $55 million. That's for the charging equipment and the infrastructure at both of our bus maintenance facilities. And then right now, that doesn't include any backup, right? So if the electrical grid, for some reason, we have a brownout or a massive power failure, I'm not going to be rolling out buses in the morning because my buses won't charge overnight. So we would have to add another $25 million for a photovoltaic / battery energy storage system. So these are basically gigantic batteries where we're storing electricity that we take from both solar cells and the grid. And then we actually charge our fleet at night from that system. And so then the next day it charges up and we charge again at night. And so we're constantly just going through that. But it always guarantees that at least for a couple of days, I would be able to generate enough electricity to run my buses. A hydrogen fuel cell, we're looking at $46 million to construct hydrogen fueling stations and fueling infrastructure at both of those other facilities. And again, if I wanted to do something where I had a backup system in order to generate the electricity necessary to run the fuel cell infrastructure, we put in here $12.5 million, but it would likely be less than half that cost because the hydrogen fuel cell infrastructure doesn't use nearly the amount of electricity that the battery electric would. Next slide. So these are just a list of the facilities. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but our rough estimate is $55 million for the battery electric. Next slide. And $46 million for the fuel cell. Next slide. So SDG&E has been a partner with us on these battery electric buses. We signed a non-binding agreement with them in 2017 to support the program development and approval. They got their final CPUC decision in 2019 for a 5-year program to assist with building out charging infrastructure, not the chargers, but the actual infrastructure necessary to put the chargers in. So they're helping us with our 6-bus pilot out in Escondido. Next slide. So just a little bit of details about their rate. Their rate is basically built around a subscription charge. So we subscribe to a dedicated power level. So we tell them how much power we're going to need on any given day. And then we subscribe to that. And then there's actually a charge on a time of use basis for how much energy we use per kilowatt hour. So you can see the rates there, like I was saying, on peak, midday charging out and en route is going to cost me 4 times as much as it does to charge between that midnight and 6 a.m. Next slide. So there's a lot of numbers on here. I just want to draw your attention to the far right. When you look at the fuel cost per mile, this is for electricity up at the top, and on the bottom is hydrogen. These numbers are slightly different now than when we did this, but this just kind of gives you an idea. So right now, my CNG cost per mile is about 25 cents. So as you can see, our average cost for going to battery is roughly twice that, and our average cost for going to hydrogen is, in this case, quite a bit higher. We now feel that the actual cost on hydrogen is probably more like 75 cents to $1 a mile. Next slide. When we look at the total cost of this, obviously a bus requires maintenance. The fueling station requires maintenance. There's a certain amount of midlife overhauls that you have to do to a bus, be it battery electric, CNG, or hydrogen fuel cell. So when you look at the total cost of ownership, you can see there that the costs for battery electric, again, appear lower than the CNG or the hydrogen fuel cell, but we're basing that off of that first year, and we're not basing that off of the entire fleet. So we anticipate that the costs for the all three are probably actually pretty similar when you get down to it. Next slide. This just kind of gives you and again, this is a really rough estimate. I don't want anyone to go and quote these numbers as gospel. So the total cost of the program, this is the fleet. This is the necessary infrastructure, 14 years of fuel and maintenance for that entire fleet. As you can see right now, CNG looks pretty attractive, but again, you'll notice there's no number in the infrastructure because I already have that. When you go and look at the cost of the fuel and maintenance though, for CNG, battery electric, and fuel cell electric, they're different, but they're not that as drastically different as you would expect, especially when you consider the cost of the fleet replacement. You know, the numbers there are pretty drastic. So the high end cost for all of this is roughly $150 million delta, and that's again over 14 years. But again, these are really rough hypothetical numbers that we were just trying to paint a picture of how drastic the costs could be. Next slide. So just in summary, by 2029, 100% of my bus purchases have to be zero emission unless I have a compelling reason why I can't make that. All of our CNG buses, if we were to follow that guidance, would be phased out by 2042 based on that 14-year life. Battery electric buses cannot cover all of our blocks without on-route charging even in 2042. The only way for us to get to 100% is those three options. And Buy America and testing may impact timing and availability of zero emission buses because not all of them have been Buy America certified and Altoona tested quite yet. So there's only a few out there on the market. That may change later on, but again, I'm not a fortune teller. So that's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Damon. And just to do a quick time check here, we have about 7 minutes left. So if we do have any questions for Damon or comments, just want to make sure that we're able to get those in here. So any questions or comments by the public or the board members at this time?
I don't see any hands raised in the attendee list. And I'm not catching any from the membership.
Okay. Well, seeing no further comments or questions, Damon, thank you so much for that comprehensive view at the program, and we'll look forward to keeping track of it as it moves forward. So thank you very much from all of us up in North County as well.
Thank you.
Excellent. So we'll go ahead and move on to just announcing when the next meeting of the Energy Working Group will be, which will be Thursday, October 22nd at 11:30. And if there is no other business before us, the meeting will be adjourned a little early. Thank you to everybody. Hopefully we'll see you on October 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.